Hello, I am here. So Michael, do you want to say your name? Because I'm going to get that wrong.
Oh, the silly one I put up there.
This is Michael Raymond, also known as
Miguelito Sanchez Guadalupe Ramirez de la Rosa del Raimundo.
So Michael Raymond, who is like Erin, who you met yesterday, he is a co-writer, a sprint buddy, a former book coach. We worked in the same book coaching company. He wrote stories for both Hellcats. He wrote the most gonzo story that you're going to read this year. And he also, what's that?
Lots of catnip in that story.
Lots of catnip. And he wrote another story for Hellhounds, Ralphie Boy. If you want to know about dramatic tension and about how to really get your readers' hearts pounding, you need to read that story. What's Ralphie Boy called? Is it called Ralphie Boy?
Ralphie Boy is Ralphie Boy, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no, the dramatic tension in that, the setup in that is just a superb piece of storytelling. So he's also been working with me on this big doom scribbler project that's been going on for a couple of years. So he's been writing characters that are in this post-apoc series that we've been working on. And he is here to talk to us about his historical, when we're calling it a historical, not historical romance, right? Just historical.
I think we're just calling it historical fiction. Sometimes we dilly-dally around with lit fic, but I think it's historical fiction. Maybe
I think it's definitely lit fic.
It's a little bit of a lit fic bent.
It is. We started workshopping this in Madrid, and we talked about your main protagonist's misbelief. And I told the audience then, and I'm going to tell them now, this is pretty much novel writing 701. This is not 101. What we're going to do here with this, what he's going to do with his main protagonist and the antagonist is very, very hard to pull off. Very hard to pull off. You will be tempted because you understand this intuitively. You understand what he's doing because you have your own misbelief, even if misbelief is a new idea to you. But I'm telling you that it is extraordinarily difficult to pull off. And I would, if I was still coaching, which I am not, I would discourage most of my writers, many of whom are very, very hardworking and very, very talented. I would say hold off until this is your 4th or 5th book, at least, because the nuance of actually keeping the dramatic tension when you've got this kind of setup is very sophisticated. So, Michael, yes. No pressure at all.
None at all.
Who is your main protagonist?
My main protagonist is a 17-year-old devoutly Catholic French girl named Isabelle de Caen, living in the 1930s and 1940s of France, so Depression and World War, in Normandy. So D-Day sort of factors into that.
Okay. What is her dominant misbelief?
Her dominant misbelief is that she is utterly and completely unworthy of being loved.
And where did she first?
By people or by God or anybody?
Oh, I talked over you. So by people, by God, by anybody.
Right.
So the universe is against her.
Correct.
Okay. So where did she first encounter this misbelief?
When Isabel was 10, around the age that she would have been confirmed. I got that right? Confirmed? Christened? Confirmed. I'm not Catholic, so.
Yeah. That's all right. You know plenty of Catholics.
I do, but I get my terms mixed up occasionally. Anyway, when she was about 10 years old, she was dared to go into a cellar that was supposedly haunted and to find the ghost that was haunting the cellar. And instead, what she found was some very damning evidence that revealed that she is illegitimate, that her mother, obviously her mother is her mother, but her father is, who has been her father, is not. And that actually her father is the man in whose cellar she is, which is in fact.
So what meaning does she take from that? So this is the fundamental moment when the misbelief is forged.
Correct,
right?
Correct. And fundamentally, I mean, I think if anybody were 10 and suddenly found out that your dad wasn't your dad, and that you've been essentially you've lived a lie unknowingly, that your parents have been lying to you all this time, that would obviously have some impact. But as a devout Catholic at that time, with the understanding of that the way the church worked at the time, was that you are outside of God's grace, and that you cannot go to heaven, and that you cannot be buried in consecrated ground when you die. So it's a big thing.
So remind me, because it's been a while since I've read this manuscript. Does she get confirmed?
Not in the book. I mean, it's not an element that's in the book.
Okay, because it would be a very, very interesting as a Catholic, as an ex-Catholic, it would be an interesting moment, because when you're confirmed, you become an adult in the church. It's when you choose the church, even though you're 10. And I wonder, knowing that she was illegitimate, whether or not she would allow herself to choose God's grace. I think that if it was in there, she'd have to have already been confirmed, because I know enough psychologically about her. She wouldn't allow herself that.
Right.
So
no, you're correct.
that's really interesting. So just as an aside, you've been on part of this journey with me in the last year, but I have been exposed to a lot of people who have what's called a DNA surprise, or not parent expected. And there are people who are in their 60s, 70s, 80s who found out that usually their dad isn't their dad, or their parents aren't their parents, and it rocks their entire world. You don't even have to be 10. It's profound. It goes all the way to identity. So I think what you have hit on works on so many levels and will speak to so many people. So she finds out she's illegitimate, and she decides that that means not only am I unloved and unlovable, but also I'm outside God's grace.
Right.
So then, where does this crop up in the novel? How does that crop up?
I mean, it kind of it's a recurring theme throughout the novel, but there's three, we could call them tent poles, like big themes, thematically related that really impact her. And God bless her. I mean, she's young. She's really trying. She's trying to overcome this misbelief. She doesn't understand it's a misbelief, obviously, but she keeps trying to overcome it no matter what happens. But, so June 6, 1944, the Normandy invasion happens, and American paratroopers land essentially all around her little farm village. She's in a rural community, and she befriends one of them. One of the soldiers befriends her, and they have a nice friendship blossoming. And then he's blown up very graphically and horribly in front of her, and her guts, her instinct, her heart tells her, God doesn't love me. He's not even going to allow me to have a friend.
So in Lisa Kron, so anybody who's read Story Genius will see that moment again as this thing happens. So plot happens and impacts story, and the character creates meaning around it, creates a meaning about themselves. I love this example and how so clear it is. It's really clear that this happens. And if she had a different misbelief, she might think, wow, he was so unlucky, or he was in the wrong place at the wrong time, or there are all kinds of meanings that she could have given to this moment, but she didn't. She made it about herself. And what she said about herself was, this means I'm not even allowed friends. God dislikes me so much, I'm not even allowed friends. Wonderful, wonderful decision.
Well, and one could even take it a step further and say that God doesn't love me, doesn't want me to have friends, and by punishment, he punishes those who dare to try to come close.
Wow. I probably have told you this before, but after my father died, so my brother died very young, and then my father died very young, and my mother's takeaway from that was, God is using me as target practice. So it wasn't about, having a heart problem or a brain tumor. It was, God is using me for target practice. I think you're spot on psychologically. All right, give me another example of when her misbelief is compounded. So she's doubling down on this misbelief.
Right. So then over the course of the novel, she falls in love with somebody and sort of takes that risk, like, God doesn't love me, but this person does. So I'm going to take a chance with that. And then that falls apart. She's betrayed by that lover. And so again, God is using me as target practice. So a different, first a friendship, then a lover, so a romantic love. I'm not going to use this, go into the depth of an example, but both her parents die. So and her
brother dies, right?
Her brother dies, or her parents die. Everyone dies. So
it's litfic. Everyone dies.
It is. There's a film, I don't know if many people have seen it, but it came out in the late 70s, maybe early 80s, called Heavy Metal. It was an animated did this animated film, kind of spacey, trippy, outer space kind of thing, and there's this very, very depraved sort of royal prince of some sort lounging across a large throne. And when somebody says, "What happens if we don't do what you tell us?" He says, "He dies, she dies, everybody dies." So it's kind of like that.
But much more serious.
Much more serious, exactly. So anyway, going back to where we were.
Yes. And another example?
Yeah, so the friend dies, the lover dies, the family, the parents, the mother, the father.
And she takes that all to mean something about her.
Correct. It's all her fault.
Misbelief is always about self.
Exactly. And then lastly, the relationship with God himself, maybe himself there, dies. She, though a little differently in that case, she severs that bond herself by burning down a church.
So I think we shouldn't give away why. I think we shouldn't give away why, because I do believe that this is going to be a blockbuster. I believe that this is the highest kind of lit fic and is going to do enormously well. I just really think it's wonderful.
No pressure to finish it, Michael.
No pressure, no pressure. I mean, there is no pressure when you're friends with me. So this is the bit where I'm telling people that this is very sophisticated, and writing novel 701, who is the antagonist in her story?
One could say the war is her antagonist. One could say Raymond Brechard, who is her biological father, who treats her like crap all through the book, is the antagonist. One could say God is her antagonist. But really, I think that she is her own antagonist. She's the one who is constantly fighting herself, really.
Right. Because if she didn't see herself as a victim, if she didn't see herself as unlovable, if she didn't believe that God didn't love her, then she would look around her and see a different world, right? There were stories of heroism in World War II. There are stories of people doing just astounding things and not collapsing in on themselves. I know this is going to be hard for a lot of people, because they, as I said at the beginning, they will be tempted to go this route, to have the misbelief turn into the antagonist. But it depends on your genre. It really depends on your genre. But for the most part, most fiction likes an embodied antagonist. So certainly, I write post-apoc, and they really, really like a human antagonist. They like a baddie to go up against.
I wish I had one of those too.
Well, Remy was a baddie for a long time.
Right.
And he is really a baddie. And like, there's a suggestion, right, that her mom is still really in love with Remy.
Correct.
So you could write it that way. You just haven't.
Correct.
And I would just say that for genre expectation, so in lit fic, women's fiction, in a lot of romantic fiction, the main protagonist can be their own worst enemy. But for almost all action oriented genres, anything that is in the superhero genre, anything that is in the thriller genre, anything that is in crime, police procedural, even cozies, pretty much the antagonist needs to be embodied in another person. So really,
well, in all those genres as well, it's oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying to people who are listening, think very, very carefully about your genre expectations. I mean, I love Michael's book. If you can't tell, I love Michael's book. But think very carefully about your genre expectations before you go this route, because you could run afoul of your readership if they are expecting and wanting and hoping for a baddie. Of course, I was supposed to talk about baddies in Vegas. Maybe I'll save that for next year.
But what I was going to say is that when I was cross-talking over you was, and you have far more to say about this than I do, because you've written in a lot more genres and you've coached people in a lot more genres than I have. But my understanding anyway is that, I mean, lit fic you have the liberty to dive into a character and their psyche and see how they change over time. Whereas with the other genres you mentioned, that's just not how what the reader expects.
Yeah, so the amount of interior, I get dinged for the amount of interiority that's in my post-apoc.
Exactly.
There are some readers that love it, but I had at least one, there's only one beta reader that has ever said, I just can't do this anymore. I don't want to know what they're thinking. I want them to be out there doing things. I don't want to see them react. I don't want to be inside. I do want to be inside the feeling, but I don't want to be inside the thoughts. But in litfic, you absolutely want that interiority. And you're going to spend a lot of time there. I didn't actually end up making this video, but I have been reading, oh, it's not here, I thought it was here, The House by the Cerulean Sea, which is very, very wonderful. And I looked at the page number and I was around page 100. And I realized that in plot terms, one thing had happened. And in post-apoc, that wouldn't be possible. In post-apoc, the goal, attack, thwart, the plot triangle needs to be really tight and close together. And the closer you get to litfic, the further apart that can be. And the more time you can spend building things up in setting and characterization. I mean, they all have to happen together still. But, you know, I was on page 100 and pretty much one thing had happened.
Well, and I don't know if we want to go there or not, but one of the things
now.
You know, where are we going with this? No, one of the things that we had talked about when we were have talked in the past was that this particular story is actually kind of real time, maybe as the reader is reading, they're seeing the development of Isabel's misbelief.
That's right.
Which we see manifested much later in the book when she makes an appearance as a 50 years older, with her misbelief firmly entrenched, right? So
yes.
So when you say we have time to, but we have litfic, you can explore the psyche, you can dive into things. This might be an example of.
Absolutely, absolutely. Anybody who's read Story Genius, and you and I coached Story Genius. So Michael is very modest when he says, you know, I coach a lot more people. He and I were pulled out of the pool of coaches and we were turned into the moderators for Lisa Cron's Story Genius class. So we did almost all of the question answering because, you know, when you work with a superstar writer, they turn up once a week and we're like what do you call it in American colleges when there's somebody who sets up the slides and hands up the homework assignments?
The TA, the teacher assistant?
Yeah, so we were basically the TAs, right?
Yes, we were.
Yeah, but we were the TAs who answered all the questions in the forums. And so Michael and I worked very, very closely together on this. If you are looking at Lisa Cron's Story Genius, she has what she calls a ticking clock to work out where the novel starts, where the rubber hits the road, where the plot hits the story, where something hits the misbelief when we've got the inciting incident. In her world, Michael's book hasn't started yet because she's really talking about a very particular kind of story. And she believes that all stories have misbelief, but this formative thing that he's got going on that's around the time of the formation of the misbelief, she doesn't go into that a lot. She doesn't go into fiction at that level, which I think is a really interesting conversation. So I don't want to confuse things, but Michael, can you talk for a minute about the book ending of your novel and how you set this up? So even though the majority of the story, which in Save the Cat terms would be fun and games, the majority of the story is when she is a kid, but the setup, she's not a kid, right? Can you talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, trying to think of the best way to do that. At the end of the 1930s, 1940s part, which is the bulk of the story, she leaves France. She's lost everything in life, but she leaves France with this child, this infant, and which is not hers. And so as a result of that infant's origins, she's constantly reminded as she sort of adopts this child of all the failures in her life because from the same town, and reminds her of all the failures of her relationships. So that said, she leaves 50. So the story begins with Isabel age 67. So 50 years have passed. She's never returned home. She can't go back there and have those wounds reopened and revisit those ghosts. But this little child is now 50 and wants to know her origins. And so through some story stuff, they end up back at the place where this all began in Point Bocage, this little village in Normandy. And by being back there, Isabel is essentially forced to relive this period of her time, which is what the book covers, that she's blocked out of her life so long.
And cut herself off from love.
Right, exactly. Blocked off to the point where she is unable to form a healthy relationship with this child that she raised as her mother. So she's not able to show love to the child. The child is stunted as a result. Isabel is just this sort of emotionless, walled off human being. All this stuff happens. And then we come back to her again at 67. So it's it was present time, the past, present time. And now she's 67 and she's confronted again with her misbelief. And then so she's I'm trying not to give away the ending.
Yeah, don't give away the ending. So the choices are when there's the big push on the misbelief, either your main protagonist, any genre, either they overcome it,
correct,
or they double down and they accept that what they have always feared is true or believed is true, and then we are in tragedy or horror. So they are her choices. Yes, sure. So we're not going to tell you what she chooses to do, but this is a story about somebody who walled themselves off from love because they decided that they were unlovable, and it explores how that misbelief was formed in very, very beautiful writing, Michael, and very, very compelling storytelling. I don't know how much time we have. Do we have a clock on this? Is there a place where it tells us?
I don't know. I'm not seeing one on my end.
I don't see one, and I'm oh no, that's paused. No, let's not do that. In terms of her misbelief, I'm going to ask you one more question, and then I'm going to go to the giveaway.
Okay.
In terms of her misbelief, what would you say is the lowest point for her, the lowest point in her life?
It's got to be when the final rejection, right? When she rejects God at the very end, and because God has utterly abandoned her and taken everything from her. So I would say that's got to be the rock bottom.
Yeah. I love that the examples that you picked are the structural tentpoles of this story, even though it's book-ended with the, set in the present, going into the misbelief, set in the present again. The actual structural tentpoles of it are all to do where plot hits story and makes her believe more deeply that she is unlovable. I can't wait for you to finish this book, Michael.
Neither can I. Way too long of a project.
So I have been doing giveaways, and I would once again I will offer people a choice between hellhounds or hellcats, and the question that I'm going to ask again in the comment section on the Facebook page is, what is your protagonist's dominant misbelief? Remember, misbelief is always about the self, and it's always a reflection of how they feel about themselves. So some of the answers that I've been seeing this week are about the effects of having a misbelief, but you need to dig a layer down to get to, I am unlovable, I am incapable of action, I am frozen, I am, or if we go, yesterday we talked about hubris and whether or not we could go the hubris route, which is, I am unstoppable, no one can touch me, I am invincible, which, you're getting into superhero maybe land there, or tragedy, depending on how you do it. So I want to know the base misbelief of your antagonist and the warring misbelief of their did I say antagonist or protagonist? Both of those. I want both of those, and I will send you a copy, your choice of Hellcats or Hellcans, and you can read one of Michael's wonderful stories, which I think everyone, you got some great reviews, didn't you? You got some really magnificent reviews on Amazon and Goodreads.
The word phantasmagoric was used in one of those. That's my proudest moment as a writer.
So that has to have been the cat one.
That was the cat one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They are wonderful stories, and it makes me a bit sad that they were in anthologies that, you know, are now in print only, because I think everyone should read those stories. They are wonderful. Thank you for doing this with me. Thank you for sprinting with me every day. Michael and I, how long have we known each other?
6 years?
6, 7 years?
Something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And we talk every single day.
Every single day.
Every single day. If you can find writing buddies who are on your wavelength, I can tell you that it's so good for you. Michael has, I think you've proofed pretty much everything I've written, haven't you?
I don't know about, well, it depends on what we mean by proof, but I've read all the stuff, yeah. From
Oh,
beta
no.
level or proofreading or something.
Yes, you've either beta, proofed, or edited pretty much everything. There are maybe a couple of shorts where I was on deadline and you haven't, but yes, thank you for being part of my journey. Everyone, find your writing tribe.
Find your tribe.
Bye,
and
Dad.
thank you for being on mine.
Bye.
See you. Bye-bye.
No. Oh, shoot.